According to UN reports, a few 100,000 people are being forced into the scam centers.
How can we use that dynamic elements of a customer from biometric behavior to transactional behavior and apply some of the more advanced deductive analysis, right?
I think as a society, right, we need to take away the stigma of being scammed. Because I feel like whoever that gets scammed always feels so foolish. And sometimes you feel ashamed to even report. And that skews our understanding of the problem, and that skews. Welcome to another episode of Banking After Hours. Today we're talking about a very, very important subject. The whole topic of fraud, the whole issue of scam is an ever-growing issue in Southeast Asia. In fact, Southeast Asia, unfortunately, is becoming more and more of a hotbed for scam and frauds. In fact, in Malaysia alone, my understanding is that there's at least about 57 billion ringgit that's lost to scams. So today we are joined by two experts. We have Tai, who is the Director for Market Planning for Fraud and Identity for Asia Pacific in LexisNexis Risk Solutions. And we have Julius, who is the COO of Ryt Bank, the newest digital bank to enter the Malaysian digital banking space. Gentlemen, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Always happy to. So maybe we can start broadly to get a sense of what is happening in the market, right? Tai, can you paint us a picture of what is the general fraud landscape in this part of the world right now?
Yeah, the general fraud landscape in APAC is quite diverse, as you know. We have different economies in different stages of maturity. So what we do see is that over time, those trends will converge. But in the short term, we do see, for example, in certain regions, they have different kinds of fraud. The way how regulators also react to those fraud will also change the landscape accordingly.
And Julius, what are your thoughts on the current landscape of fraud in this part of the world?
Right, so I think nobody's unfamiliar with the term, number one. I thought also post-pandemic, we've seen a very big surge in actually financial and online fraud. That has inspired our neighboring countries and the region. And Malaysia has seen a big part of that impacting a lot of our vulnerable customers, vulnerable segment society. So yes, that continues to be a challenge, but there are a lot of positives coming up where we see the industry has come together with our regulators and also our Royal Malaysian Police and a big players, the banks, have all agreed to do a collective action. And we can see that from the campaigns that we've seen in Malaysia, especially the Jangan Kena Scam campaign. And the effective implementation of the countermeasures. So probably we'll have to look forward to see what happens next.
I think definitely the education of consumers cannot be a standalone effort, right? It's not something that the industry, two players can do alone. Everybody needs to collectively be involved with the whole education process. So, earlier we spoke a little bit about how Southeast Asia is becoming a hotbed, right? And I think in countries particularly like Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, we see very sophisticated kind of organizations that's emerging from the space to conduct fraud and whatnot. Why is Southeast Asia such a hotbed for this kind of activities?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, if you look at a broader perspective, of course, the three countries that you mentioned, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, the regulatory framework as well as the legal framework and the enforcement of it is weaker than in another country. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is awareness. In some part of Southeast Asia, the unbanked population is quite large. And when those consumers have their first digital experience, they're most vulnerable. And of course, cyber criminals exploit this vulnerability. The third aspect is, of course, scam centers have been setting up in those regions. And of course, and cyber criminals use very convincing tactics. For example, lucrative job posting, luring those unsuspecting victims, let's say through Thailand, which is the gateway to some of this region, because Thailand is a very attractive destination for some of the job seekers. So we do see a combination of elements that combine together that actually create this kind of environment.
Is there truth to a lot of the reporting which says that, with these job scams, right, they lure some of these prospective job seekers into one of these countries, and then they do get kidnapped, and then they themselves becomes the perpetrator of the scams? Is that a widespread issue that's happening?
Yeah, according to UN reports, a few 100,000 people are being forced into the scam centers. Yes, so there are some real life story that we have seen on the news media. Yes, you mentioned what the typical modus operandi. There's a job posting a very lucrative job offer. Unsuspectingly, of course, those victims travel to the location, their passport being confiscated, and they being actually transported into those scam centers. So they become the victim themselves, but at the same time, of course, they have a quota to meet. Financial quota to meet, and that is a perpetual cycle. So once they pay off that quota, they may decide to release, or in some cases, if they're lucky enough, they're being rescued by law enforcement.
But it's so terrifying, right? Because when we think about it, we've all received job offers overseas, and we used to think that these kind of scams are something that maybe certain segments are vulnerable to. It feels like they become so sophisticated that they go into the psyche of different segments and really be able to, I guess, hyper-personalize the fraud to specific individuals, right? And I want to jump to Julius shortly about how you guys are approaching it differently, but maybe just to direct another question to Tai to really set the scene again, right? Broadly speaking, what are the main types of fraud typologies that's emerging in the market that people like Julius, people like me should be concerned about?
Yeah. Fraud landscape has evolved quite significantly. So if you look back 8-10 years ago, it was very much like what we call third-party fraud. Basically, a cyber criminal gain unauthorized access to your account, take over your account, and basically execute transaction, for example, from your account. What we do see now with increase in what we call impersonation scams. Cyber criminal impersonate a bank officer claiming there's something wrong with your bank account.
Right.
Provide we coach you into logging in your account and transfer money to the scammers. Of course, in more advanced cases, cyber criminal could set up a fake, for example, investment website. You think you're actually investing in genuine and stocks, but it's actually, there's nothing behind it. So there are multiple ways of doing that. And of course, we do see the trend also in nowadays is what we call deepfake or AI-enabled scams. One of the most high-profile cases that we have seen recently, and that was last year, it involved a Hong Kong-based office of a multinational. Cyber criminal impersonated the company CFO and managed to convince the employee to transfer 200 million Hong Kong dollars to the scammers, because the money has never been retrieved. So that's show the idea that scams and fraud evolve over time and become more sophisticated.
And it's not just targeting consumers, but even sophisticated corporations, employees, and the vigilance definitely has to be there. Now, Julius, I want to jump to you. And I think one thing that always excites me with digital banks is you guys try to do things differently, right? I suppose my question to you is, we look at all the Monzos of the world, Revoluts of the world, they all have different approaches to these things. So when you guys design your governance, when you design your technology, you design your fraud prevention strategies, what are you guys doing different?
Of course, we cannot replicate what these early starters or movers have because they took time to build into where they are now. Fraud systems take time to become models, and that takes an average number of years to achieve. So how digital banks, and in particular where we should be concentrating on is, how can we use that dynamic elements of a customer from biometric behavior to transactional behavior and apply some of the more advanced deductive analysis, right? And that causes some amount of hyper-personalization and uniqueness, rather than I put a hard rule and says that's going to cause friction to a number of customers, right? Now, the next phase would be how can we do better authentication as compared to the one we know, which is you push to approve.
Right.
So we do it differently in the sense that we can also make the authentication more dynamic.
Okay.
Like you enter a passcode, or you may be required to enter a push authentication or a biometrics, or you may be required to do a facial recognition.
Right.
Now, so I think that is going to give us the edge into not making it just plain vanilla with a one-size-fits-all.
Right. So just a follow-up to that, right? I think when we build up new products, when we build up new services, of course, we brainstorm, we come up with our own ideas, we come up with our own approach, but we always also look to other markets to take inspiration, like, hey, this guy is doing it really well. This is perhaps something we can think about. Now, of course, without revealing your secret sauce, right? What are some examples that you're looking at overseas that you think, hey, this is a good idea maybe for us to implement or for the industry to look at?
Yep. What caught my eye when I read a few articles was consortium-level information or database, where I know the whole question about data privacy comes into play, but consortium-level data can enrich an entire industry if it's anonymized, and it gives you some level of information that can help you build onto or accelerate your model understanding. Right? So that's one play. Or like Monzo did, where they allowed crowdsourced information.
Right.
So users of the app get to contribute. If I felt a transaction was something that is risky, right? And now that can cause a benefit to the other population who are very similar in their style and pattern of usage. And so these are some things that I think as an industry we can truly benefit, and that it can help with us being more deterrent to fraud. So there's never a silver bullet, Vincent, to fraud, right? So being more deterrent to fraud.
I think, new entrants bring this kind of new thinking into the space, right? Sometimes it could be really simple interventions that solve a big problem. I think one of the clear examples is that whenever a lot of banks call to verify, if you don't have the number saved, you can't tell if it's from your bank. So a simple thing like what Revolut did is they have the in-app call, right? Very simple solution, but I guess reduces a lot of potential phishing cases, right? And I hope to see some of this cool stuff happening.
That's right, because it's about the game of trust here.
Yeah. So I guess, Tai, you guys work with so many banks around the region. Talk to us about what are some good examples, some best practices you've seen some of the banks you work with practice in the effort to prevent fraud.
Fraud is not one size fits all strategy.
Naturally,
so
yes, of course.
If you look, for example, it's an example. If you look at a credit card fraud, the risk signals is very different from the modus operandi of investment scams. So businesses have realized that, and the one-size fits all approach doesn't work. So what we have done is that LexisNexis we work with a lot of these company banks and outside banks as well, and deploy what we call multi-layer strategy.
Right.
The reason why multi-layer strategy works is that we don't look at one aspect of a transaction. We look at from a digital perspective, device intelligence, behavioral side of things, and also look at where the money is going to, what we call beneficial risk insight. If you already identify that this is a new account, you should stop the transaction. If you know that money is coming into your bank as a new account, that should also stop the transaction. So we look from different aspects of a typical event or transaction.
And you enable this kind of intelligence for your clients, is that the case?
Yes.
Okay, that's got it. I guess the other thing that I'm wondering about, because there's always two sides to the coin, right? So digital banks bring a new approach. But I'm trying to imagine as a consumer, right? So if I get a fraud case, right, I know I'm losing money, I'm panicking. I think my first instinct is I want to speak to someone. I want to pick up the phone and talk to some customer service to try to resolve my problem. And I think if we look at a lot of the digital banks in the market, they tend not to opt for a call center approach, right? But what is your thinking around this area when dealing with customer fraud cases like this?
To be very confident, and I can share this because it is already in our operations now that we have an omnichannel support. Right, and we have a voice support, an email support, and when we come into a much more visible period, you will also have a chat support.
Right.
So that's omni-channel for you.
Right.
And customers would be able to reach us 7 days a week, 24/7.
So a human at the end?
As human as possible on the voice. You can from the app you can actually go to our ticketing and raise a ticket if you wish.
Okay.
But as soon as we get the ticket, we're going to get a call back.
Right. So then a person would.
Yes, a person, or if you can just dial our number and then you can speak to a human agent immediately.
Right. Got it. So you would have that channel available. Do you foresee a day where humans can be taken out of the equation, or there always will be a need for humans to be on the other end to deal with this kind of issues?
I think the element of the AI agent is going to augmentate a lot of things for us, but it is going to work hand in hand, where I think the initial part can always be catered for, and then an escalation to a human support when it becomes more complex.
Right, when there are the fringe cases, that's where I guess AI is not as effective.
I think the empathical approach has to come into play.
Of course, right?
Yeah. So, you're already distressed with losing money.
Yeah.
You want to know if I'm going to get to recover that as soon as possible, and who best to advise you in a more accurate instance that this is what we're going to do for you.
Yeah, I think that comfort certainly helps as well. What about you, Tai? Like, do you work with any digital banks in this space that also have any thinking around this area as well?
Yeah, we do work with a lot of digital banks, or what we call virtual banks. Of course, they have different, they face similar regulatory challenges. Yeah. But of course, their business model is slightly different. Also, maturity is slightly different. So we work with those banks to understand where they are in the customer. And of course, the initial part, especially after launch and after the initial establishment of the bank, is more in terms of customer acquisition. So that's something you also need to incorporate. Traditional bank, they just need to basically more in a way protecting the customer base, their current customer base, while virtual banks or digital banks are actually looking to expand and grow rapidly.
Okay, very cool. Maybe just one cheeky question for you, Julius, because I know you used to come from an incumbent banking background, right? And I think sometimes I speak to a lot of people who jump from incumbent banks to digital banks. One thing they always think about is the things they weren't able to do in the old bank. And now they jump to a new bank, it's like, hey, I want to do this differently. Is there anything within the fraud governance space that is like that for you, that you want to do differently?
Number one, we are a Fintech doing digital banking service, and not a bank doing digital service, right? So that's the underlining. So we are given that white canvas, right? And one of the things coming from the industry, the past, is that speed to customer, right? And I get an alert, but then there's that humanized value that I want to make a decision, call back, non-call back. Now, if I deploy an AI agent, that decision is very quickly resolved. That call out is happening. That escalation, as I mentioned earlier, is happening, right? So the speed is always going to be there. Now, I can also set it up to say that the AI agent fails to call, then prompt the customer.
Right.
So everything is being managed in a much more quicker instance, right? So that's one area where we can improve it. The other would be if a customer is disputing something. I can also do a few checks to validate if this is a valid dispute, right? Rather than prolonging the process. So some of the other grievance has been customers complain that there's no transparency in their dispute. The turnaround time has been lag.
I've been there.
Yes.
1-2 months, like, oh, come on.
Exactly. So how do we make it faster? Right? So the AI agent can do all of this in a much more expedited way and a more transparent way. So I think transparency is the most important thing, right?
I think it removes a lot of anxiety.
Exactly.
From that process.
Exactly. So those are the key areas where we see that, of course, it's going to take time and effort, but it's going to improve the quality of our service.
And I guess my common thread with conversations with folks from Ryt is that a lot of things have a very AI-centric approach, which I guess is your unique value proposition. And I think, of course, a lot of banks are also thinking about how to use AI as well, right? What are some effective ways that you've seen banks use AI to combat fraud?
Yeah, so AI relies on data, on a feedback of the customer that's feeding into the model. You can't train them all without data. You can't train them all without actually specifically identifying fraud cases and assign them to the appropriate category. So that's one aspect. So we do see banks, for example, that actually use machine learning to an effective way to actually create a customized model for them. Training that model over time, of course, incorporating the industry trend as well, but also customize those models to the specific need of that bank.
Very cool. So maybe just to shift gears a bit, and maybe one last question before we wrap up to closing thoughts, right? And as Tai earlier mentioned in the conversation, every market has different maturities, not just the players, but the regulators as well. So they all have different approaches that's catered to the uniqueness of the market, right? So from your vantage point, what are some regulatory approaches or frameworks that you think are good and can be emulated in different markets?
Yeah, we do see regulators have different speeds in terms of progress. Some are more proactive, some are reactive. Of course, the second aspect is also, it's good that you have regulatory requirements in place, but also enforcement is important.
So 100%.
Yes, and of course, using that, and many regulated where we work with, they are actually creating what we call portals or tools for consumers and banks to report. But this not a real-time portals. And that is one of the disadvantages of course using AI and also real-time monitoring solution is to actually detect this kind of anomalies in real time. The other part is, of course, you still need the first line of defense, which is the banks, which is the businesses that actually facing this risk, and they report it to the regulators. So it's a different dimension. It's not one side, no one-way street, but it's actually two-way street for both industry and the regulator.
Very cool. Any comments on regulatory approach? Because I do have a follow-up question for you as well.
On regulatory, not so much, but I think they should not be adopting a one-size-fits-all.
Naturally, because every market is
different. Also, players by size are different, products are different.
I mean, it has to be proportionate to all of these things. Right? So I guess my follow-up question, because I think Tai brought up a good point about banks being the first line of defense. So in a traditional bank, we've seen cases in Singapore, in Malaysia, and other markets as well, where the bank officers are the ones who proactively stop fraud from happening. They see certain irregularities, right? What is your approach to that, since that is removed from the equation?
I think that the human value chain on fraud deterrence is still very important. I think the effort made by a combination of what the regulation allows you to do, but you need to push the envelope into what you can do better, is where the technology comes into play. All in all, I'm still convinced that you cannot work on an own by an institution.
Right.
You need to still have a wider industrial data set, if otherwise and possible, a regional data set.
It takes a village to raise a child.
Absolutely.
It takes a country to prevent fraud.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I guess in closing, let's talk about just general things that you think is important for our audience to know who are tuning in that we haven't already covered. We will start with Tai and then we'll jump back to Julius for in closing.
I think one of the most important things, and I always advise that to the audience, think before you act. Think before you act. So make sure you understand what you're doing. Make sure you understand that this link or that or the advice or whatever you receive is genuine. And if you have doubt, contact the business directly rather than just click on the link and then get yourself into trouble in a way.
very solid advice. And any advice for FIs tuning in?
I think banks are getting better in terms of the first line of defense in a way, in doing so. But of course, as I mentioned before, it's also depending on how regulators are enforcing those requirements.
Julius?
Right. I think it's a collaborative effort. Everybody needs to come through, pull their sleeves up, and get this done. And that also means the customers and our users, right? I think what we're seeing today is that the reportable numbers, we are not too sure whether it's actually those numbers, right? But we do see that the numbers through our NSRC, thanks to the regulator and the RMP,
and
have given us that avenue.
For those who may not be in Malaysia,
NSRC is the National Scam Response Center. So that has been the most visible effort being done, and I think there's a lot to learn from the data that we have and how we can collectively work as an industry to improve.
I think not just as an industry, I think as a society, right? We need to take away the stigma of being scammed, because I feel like whoever that gets scammed always feels so foolish, and sometimes you feel ashamed to even report, and that skews our understanding of the problem, and that skews our ability to communicate the problem to our peers, right? I think that's also another important aspect to consider as well. With that, gentlemen, you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you for your time and your insights.
Thank you very much.